Okay, now it's recording. Welcome back, Hanging Out Podcast, possibly back from the dead, -1 bear, +1 Bruce Bernizzi. And today we are joined by Ashley Cassaday, whose name I hope I got right, and who you might know from her mythological, dreamlike pictures, but more probably from her avid social media presence and conventions. Hey, Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Good. So this all started, I saw you post several things about shows recently. I think you actually did a price breakdown, which was really interesting. But also you are getting into traveling shows, which is something I have tried to avoid since moving back home to the South.
Traveling shows are most of what I do, on the other hand.
Right, yeah. So I've got Bruce here to counterbalance me. I wanted to know how you were getting, what your setup looked like getting back into that, because it's something I feel like I've been sleeping on, honestly.
My setup?
Yeah, for traveling. It's got to be different than driving, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, Dragon Cons is the only one that I'd flown to yet. Now, granted, I've done it the last 2 years, and I hate driving because, like, when you live in Texas, it's so huge, and you get sick of traffic and crap. And I'm also kind of a wuss when it comes to that stuff. I'm like, I don't really like driving alone for long distances, and then also turn around. Like, I also work full time, so I have to get back. So flying is a different deal. And with Dragon Con, sorry, let me turn off these Discord notifications. Dragon Con was definitely, the first year was not too bad because I just had like a backdrop. And then the second year, which was last year, was definitely more of an experience because I had more stuff, but it was mainly like, luckily Dragon Con, when you're in the art show and you have a booth, they give you the backdrops and everything. So but I like wiped out a guy in the airport with like one of my suitcases because like I had my print case and 2 suitcases, and I'm like going down the escalator at the Atlanta airport, and one of them slipped, and it was just like and hit a guy in the back. Like, easy lean into traveling because there were so many concessions that I didn't have to worry about. Now I'm going to Boston in like 2 months. And like, I'm kind of I have to bring in everything and probably ship more like to someone who's not like a friend of mine. So like, there's all these new things for me to navigate, but that's just part of the game, I guess. The bigger you get, the more you have to worry about, but like, it's more of an investment, but sometimes, it pays off. And so I'm also excited to travel too, because especially since COVID, because 2020 was supposed to be like my big travel year. Like, I was going to do Dragon Con in Denver and North Carolina. And then obviously those all got wiped off the map. So I'm kind of making up for lost time now by trying to do so, while also with what I can, because again, with working full time as well, I have to accommodate that. So luckily, like Boston's my one mainly during this school year, but then like I have a lot in the summer. That's where I usually hit it hard the most, because obviously I'm off, which that'll be nuts. This will probably be my busiest convention season yet if I get into everything that I plan to. So I'm like excited, but also I'm like, oh gosh, I hope I'm not getting in over my head.
So I know what the prep work looks like pretty much on mine end, and mostly Bruce's end because we talk all the time. But what's it look like for you? You said you were shipping. What stuff are you shipping, and what stuff are you packing in the bag?
The tapestries, right?
I have blankets, woven blankets, tapestries. People flip between the two, but like that was, I had a Kickstarter last year because I wanted to do a new product. Like that was a big change last year, because like my approach to cons was like I was seeing the way people were spending, and so I did a Kickstarter for these woven blankets, and they went really, really well. And so I started selling them at conventions, and they went even better. And so now they're a staple. So that's the main thing that I ship. Everything else, I've had other products that I've tried out too. Like at Dragon Con, I have play mats. Obviously I have prints, pins, but I'm kind of restructuring. Like, for example, ironically enough, play mats do not do well for me. And so I'm retiring them, even though that is a very big staple for a lot of artists. I think part of it with me is, and granted, this may not be accurate, but maybe just with me, is like a lot of my work, even though I have a broad audience of both male and female, I think like the type of work that I do, which is like this really dreamy, like fairy fantasy kind of stuff, it doesn't really lend to tabletop gaming mats. That's just my perspective, maybe, like with my audience. And so like just seeing how they aren't doing well, I'm like, okay, I tried them. I'm just gonna retire them out, but then try something different. Like, like the blankets went over really well. I'm doing more small stuff like pencil pouches and stuff, but I'm also trying to be careful. I don't want to make products just for the sake of making products. I'm trying to like, because I don't want to be super merch heavy, but I also want to make things that I feel like resonate with my style of artwork well too, which also resonates with my audience,
So the tapestries are like your top of the shelf seller.
Yes.
Not that they're selling the most, but the highest price thing.
They honestly,
what do you
I feel
sell
like
them for?
I sell them for 150, and I mean, I would say they sell pretty well. Like I brought 20 to Dragon Con and I sold all but one. And that's the display. So yeah, so that was like a good chunk of my profit.
They're huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like they did really well.
I'm surprised that they're only 150. So
yeah, that surprised me.
I can understand why they would fly off the shelf at that kind of price, because I think I would look at something that size and that quality and say, wow, like this is a really great deal.
200 would because I'm also known to use them. I like, obviously I'm going to shows to make money, but I also am trying to think within the level of practicality, because the reason why I did the blankets was, when like, for example, in 2022, which was my first time at Dragon Con, like I know we just talked about this off air, but like I had expectations of making 5K at Dragon Con. And granted, I had a table and I think I ended up net, like, making net 2K, which I was really underwhelmed, but I enjoyed Dragon Con. And but I noticed, I heard a lot of people say I'm on a budget. I'm sorry if you hear my dogs. Like I was like, people are like, I'm on a budget, or the other thing is like, I just mostly had prints. The thing I hear a lot is I have no more room in my house, and so this was a pattern I started seeing at shows. And so I had, from a business standpoint, I had to think about, okay, what is it like? People are like, everybody was like, well, people are penny pinching. I'm like, I don't think they're penny pinching. I think they're just being more intentional of where their money's going. Because at the end of the day, art, like as a print, like I sell my prints for 40 and they do sell, but they're a luxury item. Like at the end of the day, it's a luxury item that people buy that, like, it's not, doesn't have a use other than being on the wall. And especially now people are saying, I have no more room in my house. I have too many prints. Well, now people also are limited on how they can use them. So when I thought about a product that people could use, I'm like, okay, how about like a blanket, like not just a blanket to print, but a nice woven blanket that, that looked nice, that translated well, and like people could use it on their wall, or they could fold it up, put it on their bed, or put it on a couch. And it feels like more of a justifiable purpose, because not only is it practical, it lasts a really long time. And I think someone's going to feel more justified dropping $150 on a blanket than $150 on prints, even though both have
and it's easy enough to ship. So for instance, I've got canvases, they're 2 inches thick. Shipping a ton of canvases is not something I have even tried to do yet.
Not for the faint of heart.
It's, by the time I ship enough for me to make a ton of profit, I may as well just buckle down and do a pallet or something. So
and that's
I
the
need
other
to
thing.
find some way to.
Well, and that's the other thing with me too, is I'm a digital artist. I don't have, like, one of the big things about Dragon Con's art show is like, people make a lot of money from their originals too. It's like, I don't have originals. And like, there is the canvas thing. I've thought about that, and I might touch on that a little bit this year. But again, being digital, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to translate this a little bit better, just because I don't have original paintings that I can sell for thousands of dollars, but someone who does original stuff, like they have probably a different way to market, their products, or like, their paintings and stuff like that. It's just for me, like personally, but I just like, and then again, like you were saying, the price point, like 150, it's like at the end of the day, it's like, I still make decent profit on it that I'm like, I'm happy. And again, I don't want to be, it's more of a luxurious item, but I don't want to be so pretentious. I don't want to be like, because it is a manufactured item, and I want there still to be a range of accessibility to something like that, because also when I have that, then it gives more of a wider audience for people to enjoy it. you know.
And
Sure,
it
it's a
depends
balance.
on the audience. I had, when I first started, I think I had sort of the tater tot issue. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but tater tots had terrible sales till they raised the price and started selling them as a high commodity.
Mhm.
The I used to only sell larger versions of my prints at shows. They never moved, ever.
Mhm.
And when I started selling like nice framed work, suddenly I never went home with one. It was flying off the shelf.
Mhm.
Do you hang your tapestries on a one of those photo backdrops?
I do.
Or
Yeah,
how
I
do you?
just use like they're pretty big. I think both of them, like one's horizontal, one's vertical. I think they measure like 5 by 7. So
Yeah, how do
like I
you how do you get those to the travel shows?
those well again like if they're product, then I just or are you talking about the backdrop stands? Is that what you're talking about?
The
Or are you
Yeah,
talking
the
about the
stands themselves. That's what I used to
Oh,
use, and I had to carry it around in a ski bag.
gotcha. So that's what I did. And so my first year at Dragon Con, when I had to have one, I did a big giant golf bag, which did work,
Hmm.
but it was also a pain in the butt because, like, I mean, we've all been through the Atlanta airport. If anybody has not been through the Atlanta airport, it is a circus to get through. And so,
Yes.
like, I didn't know this that at airports, if you have a giant bag, like a golf bag or something like that, they check it into a separate luggage area. And so, like, I flew into the Atlanta airport,
Separate
like, it
pickup.
was supposed to go through one place, it didn't go through there, and like I spent like an hour trying to
Oh,
find
no.
my stuff, and then they're like, oh yeah, it's over there. And like so it was just kind of it worked, but it was another bag to check. And so I'm
Yeah.
trying to, with my backdrops, like for example for Boston, I'm trying to see if there is either a suitcase I can buy where I can break it down enough to fit my poles into the suitcase, or if I can get a smaller backdrop. Because ideally, I would like to not have the ski bag just because it's a pain in the butt, and I probably almost threw out my bag. I probably carried
I have
way too much
a
more than I need.
Bruce has a fix for this, but I haven't
I
tried it.
I do have a fix of sorts for this.
Tell me.
But it's maybe not for everyone. So my fix is I order a new backdrop for each away show, and
Oh,
if I have a friend in the area who's willing to hold on to it for me for the next year, then I can do that. In some places I've got relatives or whatnot. If I don't, I just find someone to donate it to. Like I look around whatever show I'm at, and inevitably there's people who could upgrade their backdrop, and I say, hey, would you like to have this? I don't want to throw it away, and it's actually less expensive to just order a new one from Amazon each time than to pay for like a third item of luggage,
yep.
since I'm already checking 2 bags every time I'm flying to a show. So it's like that third item of luggage is extremely expensive usually. And so it
See,
ends up just being cheaper to do that way.
and
And
that's
as
what I'm
long as
worried
I'm not
about.
wasteful. Yeah, as long as
Yeah.
it's not wasteful. And so far there's always been someone who's been willing to take it and had a use for it. Like, you meet a lot of artists at these things. So
hmm
oftentimes it's like a neighbor or something who's just getting started at this stuff. It's like, hey, you can have my backdrop. That's
hmm
one less expense for you.
Somewhat local.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'm
the
never
one
gonna forget
thing.
carrying that ski bag in the August of Indianapolis.
Oh God, there. I mean, it was September in Atlanta, and it still was a pain. Like I think, and that's what I'm worried about because like that was the other thing too. Like that's gonna be different with Boston. Because Dragon Con, like I usually fly Southwest, and because they give 2 bags checked for free.
Hmm.
But because I just found out I'm doing Anime Boston like 2 weeks ago, and the show is like in 2 months. Southwest did not have any direct flights to Boston, so I have to fly American, and I'm just like, which American, the airport's closer, but I'm like, ugh, like the cost for the check bags is like is killer. So I'm like, and it's
Yeah.
ironic, I've already invested more in Boston than I did in Dragon Con, and so I'm like, the ROI better be good on this show. I mean, I've heard good things, so because there's like, it's just that, and that's just but that's part of the game, like I've wanted to do Boston, I've wanted to do some shows outside of my normal network, and obviously I don't plan to do hundreds a year or whatever like that, like a lot of people do, but I just like, it's a new market is a new experience, and who knows what might come from that. And so, who knows if I do it next year.
Sure.
And it's funny because
It's a calculated risk every time.
It is, and like again, like there's this little Discord group I'm part of with some artists, and there's just one artist in there who like they're in college and like just did their first convention, and like they have all these questions. I'm like, oh, this is like me, like that's so many years ago. And I was telling one of the things they said is like I don't like risk taking, and granted, that's true, but also at the same time, it's like with anything in business, like you don't want to be stupid, but
That is the name of the game.
it is. And but you don't just dive into the deep end first, you build up to it. Like, I mean, again, like I've been doing conventions since 2011. And this is like the last couple years are probably like the most serious I've hit them and the most money I've invested, but that's because I've seen the return. And so it's like, and again, like most of the investment I've put back into my convention stuff. I mean, luckily this is just me because I work a full-time job. But I have the capital to reinvest back into these bigger things. So that way, like, I mean, the goal is the investment back, but I'm not like going into the red taking these risks, at least right now. So for any artists out there that are like, intimidated by starting or going into conventions, or like they're willing to drop hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, don't. It's like, it's a slow climb, and you have to start seeing the return before you start making those bigger steps. Like I'm a very conservative person, so that's my approach, of course, to it. So
yeah, whenever I did my first convention, I'd gone to Gen Con with a friend, and I spent every second in the art show just talking to people about how they do it, sort of like I'm doing with you right now. And some people I said, I don't have I'm just breaking into the industry. I don't have all this income to throw into shows and inventory and all that. I don't remember who it was, so I don't want to give the wrong person credit, but they said, I'd never tell anybody to get a credit card, but maybe you should. And that was, my first credit card, and I bought tons of stuff with it it was my business card, and then I just immediately paid it off. And so, but the whole time that you're waiting on the show, because you have to buy these things like a year in advance, the whole time my heart's just racing.
Yeah.
How much do you think you invested in that first show?
The first show, I got a single table at Gen Con, right? So it was only, how much are the single tables?
Single tables are
like 400?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Not as much as it sounds. I probably only spent 4, 5 plus backdrop, maybe 600 plus 600 just for the show and inventory, which really isn't that much. And then you add in hotel and food. Of course, you're staying in like
and getting there.
And getting there. Well,
transport,
drive. Yeah. So
well, gas that still feeds in, right? But
Yeah.
a bunch of different things. I think for mine was maybe $1,000 the first time I was doing a show, and that was to get all of my merch and backdrop, everything that I needed, plus the cost of the show, which is probably like a $400 table at Emerald City. How about you, Ashley? How much do you think you spent, like maybe on the first show that you ever did?
$100, pretty much. I was in
Wow,
college.
that's a cheap buy-in.
This was okay. I'm kind of an odd duck because like it's funny because I know all these artists from like watching their work over the years that are in these convention circles, but a lot of them I feel like, and I'm not the only one, I'm not bragging about this, but I feel like I started conventions before a lot of them. Again, my first convention was in 2011 at a little anime convention in my local area, but conventions were so different back then. Like so for example, like I was going to conventions, like I was a big anime nerd, I was cosplaying and like stuff like that, and so I went to one of my first ones. So I'm like, oh cool, I can dress up and go make money. So I like bought a booth at this little convention, and like I just had fan art. That is all I had, and I was in college at the time. And I mean, I remember very clearly. I think the booth maybe at the time was maybe $120, give or take, and I made like $1,000 that weekend. Which, like, for a college kid that's like doing that for the first time, I'm like, Mom, I'm rich. Oh my God. And now, like, but to give a frame of reference, like now, like everybody's got business models and like thinking about like their capital and stuff like that. And like, just to give context as to now, I'm not even done yet. And I've already invested $1,500 into Boston. So just
Sure.
to give which like,
Yeah.
so that's how much it's like, not just like, now granted, there's a couple of things like I did the premium booth and like some choices that probably expended the cost, but that's just like, I think it's a combination of like, obviously conventions have gotten a lot more expensive to attend over the last several years because they've gotten bigger, but also too, it's like I said, it's the name of the game. It's like, I could have like
Well,
risked and
your
got a
business
booth.
has grown.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And I'm proud of that fact. I'm like, cool. Like I paid, I think like, so Boston, they do it a little weirdly. Like, so their Artist Alley, which I think they said their attendance is maybe like 40,000 people, which is not bad. But they do their Artist Alley really interestingly. Like their basic Artist Alley, like a booth, which is like 350, which is pretty standard. Like I could do that, but it's lottery. And so, you either get in or you don't, or they have something called Pro Row where you get a bigger booth and it's like double that. It's like 700, 750, something like that, but you get a better space. And like, again, that's just a choice that I made. And also it's all original art and that's who I am. I don't really have a lot of fan art anymore. So, and again, like it's juried too. So and luckily this was my first time applying and I got in, but again, I've never done the show before. So we'll see how it goes. But, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I invested $1,500, but I also am like, even though I want that money back, I'm like, hey, this is kind of like an achievement, I guess. Cause I mean, I know artists who have, they invest even more than that, like, I like,
sure.
like, I'm just thinking, I can't even imagine, like, I don't know his numbers, but like, I'm doing San Diego Comic-Con, a 4-foot booth for $350. And then, I don't know if y'all know, I'm just throwing him out there, like Alan Panical, a friend of mine, like he does shows and I think he does like a more premium style booth at San Diego. I'm like, I can't even imagine how much of an investment that is, and he's got metal prints
Well,
and
his
all that
is
stuff.
like a split with a friend, I believe, at that particular show. But other shows he does, it's like a 20-foot booth, and quite a bit of money.
Yeah,
a
and he's
lot of
not the
different
only one.
a lot of different SKUs.
Yeah, and I mean he's not the only one. I'm just kind of throwing that out as an example because I just know,
Right, yeah.
and like there's just, and again, like there's shipping and all this stuff, but again, that's just where I'm at. It's like it's a I always say it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, like I've been running for a long time at this, so
Yeah.
yeah.
It does get more expensive. I was messaging Bruce the other day. I just happened to run out of pretty much all my inventory at once, which happens when you do a great Gen Con, right? And reordering everything. I'm looking at it now from just for Kansas City coming up. I spent, I want to say, $2,000 just on inventory. I mean, it really. So when you look at the number, your heart starts beating again. You're like, oh, what am I doing? But I really expect to sell out of most of that things that you need. So it does grow.
You look at your history of sales and you're like, okay, I average across these various shows, I've sold this much of this one and this much of that one, and I can probably estimate that future shows will be something similar. Like every once in a while there'll be like a bit of a curveball or something where some particular product gets more popular, less popular, whatever. But for the most part, like, especially when you're doing original work, right? Like that's already kind of a hill to climb. And if you are successfully getting a certain kind of number at most shows from your work that you're doing, right? It's not really
consistency,
too dependent on other trends, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, somebody asked me recently, it's a common question, but what would you have said to your younger self that would have made you more prepared? And my answer was spreadsheets. I never thought I'd be spending so much time on spreadsheets.
It's so funny you said that. I just sent one of my spreadsheets to another artist earlier because it's tax time, and so, but I'm like, this was like my first year actually like coding spreadsheets. And I'm like, I'm so proud of myself. Like I sent it to like my accountant and I'm like, and he was like, this is really organized. I'm like, okay, if an accountant's telling me I'm organized and I'm okay. Cause like, and again, like I said, I'm very paranoid and conservative, and I'm like, I want to dot every I and cross every T. So like that's the other side of the business stuff is like tracking everything and making sure like I'm a good girl. I pay my taxes. Don't skip on that stuff, friends. It's important. So
what do you hope? What price point are you at for your shows? So what do you when you go to Boston, what do you have to get back for it to be a good show for you now? I know you talked about your first Dragon Con.
So, I'll start with Dragon Con first because again, Boston, I don't have a frame of reference. So, but I feel like Dragon Con, okay, so my first year at Dragon Con, I just had prints and pins. I think I had stickers too, but not very many. I think I made like 2,200. But my second year, I grossed with the blankets and the booth upgrade, and actually my expenses were actually fairly low. I didn't have to pay for flight or hotel because I had flight credit, and then I stayed with a friend.
Mhm.
So I think I grossed like 7,000 the next year just with those changes, and the blankets
Wild.
helped, the booth helped. Yeah, it was a huge increase. So for Dragon Con, my expectation this year, especially with some changes, is I anticipate to break 10K. That is my goal. If I make the
10K
same,
club.
that's
Wow.
that's my hope. Which means for Boston,
It's a show where it can definitely happen.
yeah. And I know people say art show, which if people aren't familiar with Dragon Con, art show and comic and pop are in two different places. So the art show is kind of its own little cave at the bottom of the Hyatt. But I feel like I like the vibe in the art show. And I feel like there's still some decent money that flies in that room. So again, if my anticipation for Dragon Con is to make 10K, Boston, based on what I've heard, I'm hoping I make Dragon Con numbers. If I made 6K, I would be happy since Boston's my then I'm okay, I have inventoried for my next show for San Diego or whatever. The blankets, I still have leftover blankets from my Kickstarter, so luckily I don't have to reorder those. But so again, Boston, my anticipation is I really like to say I was talking to a friend about this. I usually hope to make at least 2 or 3 times the investment. So if I made 4,500 at Boston, I wouldn't be upset, but I would be okay, it's probably, which is still decent money.
Middling, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again,
right.
for example,
it'd be okay, maybe with some changes, this could be a good show, but it's a little iffy at that point, right? Whether you want to reinvest in that show or not.
Well, and I'm going in hard with this one. I just
Sure.
her,
that's
every which again, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. People said that about Dragon Con my first year, which was 2022, and I left. I wasn't sad because I still left with money, but I was just oh, I hope to make at least 5K, and I didn't make. I was $3,000 off of that, but then last year, just with changes, I'm it blew out of the water. So my standard for shows is I usually like to give shows 2 shots before I decide if I want to go back or not. And it was kind of funny this year because we have a local show here in Fort Worth called Anime Frontier. They're actually ran by the same people who run Anime NYC, the big ones and stuff like that. And so last year I did it, or I should say 2022 I did it. And I mean, the whole weekend, I think I made $800, and I was and it was local, and so it wasn't a lot of overhead, but I was this sucks. I'm I don't know if I want to do it next year. I'm this is going to be bad, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so I was okay, I will give it one more shot. So I did it this year, and I made again, same investment, not a lot local. I think I invested maybe only $350, and I made $2,000. And I was oh, well, crap. Now I got to keep coming back to this because for a local
now I have to keep doing.
Yeah. Well, for a local, and that's the thing people need to think about too. Is everybody's oh, we're traveling to shows, and yes, there's shows that you should travel to. Dragon Con is still my best show to date, and I travel to it. But there's something to be said about if you can find a show, even if it is $2,000, but if you don't have hotel, if you don't have flight, you have very low expenses. I'm that's a straight $2,000. You know,
it can be worthwhile. Yes.
The problem I'm trying to solve is I really want to go to shows like Denver and Emerald City. Bruce and I have talked about that. But getting something I could get a display there, but then getting the canvases or larger things to go on that display. So I'm trying to really visualize what a traveling booth might look like for me, because sort of I was saying, I had that issue where if my work wasn't displayed at a more high-end setting, it doesn't sell, it just doesn't move.
Right.
So
what I've sort of discovered about that problem, because I think, since I'm doing a lot of flying shows, and most of the time I think my philosophy of life is I don't want to make extra trouble for myself. I want easy, I want MacGyvered. I'm not one of those people who's just going to obsess over every last detail of it. And so my approach has been to some degree to let go of having the high end items at some of those shows that are difficult to display because I'm bringing all of my merch in 2 suitcases and a duffel bag onto the plane, and that's basically it. But
You've
Yeah.
moved to only having metals and normal print sizes,
right,
right?
I've moved away from canvas because I can fit metals in a suitcase much more easily, and it still fits like a similar price profile. Like it's that slightly higher end item without necessarily being like a super high end item. I guess kind of equivalent to the blankets, but like smaller. And then, like I say, I can fit them in my suitcase. The weight adds up real quickly. But I guess the sort of comforting aspect that I've discovered is that if I have a really good show with just the stuff out of my suitcase, I can make up to like maybe about 7K. Might be a little higher now because I've got like artist proofs and things that are also very lightweight and easy to carry. But like around there, which is like, okay, that's a decent show. Like if that's what all it is, then I can go home happy that I had a productive weekend. For shows like Dragon Con and Gen Con, where they have a backdrop prepared for you that you can just arrive at, that opens up the avenue of like, oh, I can bring a high end item, I can ship it there, and I have a place that I can hang it on, no problem. And that gives the possibility of a much higher end, not necessarily the surety that I will. I'll probably still have a very good show either way, but like it gives an additional possibility. But I've kind of let go of necessarily requiring that every single show that I go to has to have the super elaborate setup and all of the high end items. Some of them will, some of them won't, and they'll all be pretty much like profitable, worthwhile shows to do either way.
Well, I think there's something to be said too about the smaller stuff, like you said, like since you do work for Magic, you have the artist proofs and things like that. That was one change that I made this year too that made a huge difference. Was sorry. Was not just having the blankets, which was like my new luxurious item. It was also making the switch to being okay with small things. Like I at Dragon Con did stickers. I think I made like $1,000 alone just on stickers. Or one of my new little things I did was I did like little. I was like, I was at A-Con last year. And I saw a lot of people with mini prints, because that was the other thing I was going to say too, is like not only were people being more practical with their money, they either were willing to drop a lot of money on something well made and practical, or they were being very chintzy with their money or on a budget. So I was like, okay, I did mini prints. I did like a little mini series, like, my little tea dragons. Y'all have probably seen them. And they did really, really well. Like I think I made another $1,000 from those. So like those smaller items, like, there's something to be said about them. Say that again?
Yeah.
Do you sell those in a pack?
So my stickers, like I have like a bundle deal. I think the stickers I did, vinyl stickers, I did 1 for 7, 3 for 10. Or my Chi Dragons, I think like I was doing 15 each. They're 6x6, so $15 each. Or at the time I had 4. I think I did like the whole set for like 50 or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but but the other thing is too, like that's a change I'm trying for Boston as well. Is like I know you were mentioning earlier about only having one size of prints. I'm gonna try testing out having 2 different sizes of prints, which in the past kind of scared me, because like, so years ago I was at a convention and I did full-size prints and I did postcards, like tiny postcards, and granted my prices were a lot different, but it was like I kept seeing like people be like, oh well, like I can spend $5 on a postcard instead of $25 on a print, and I was just like, well crap, this didn't work.
It can cannibalize your sales.
Right. But the thing that kind of made me want to change it a little bit or try something is, number one, I did get, I got some feedback from some people. And so number one, like, for example, like I make all my art for me. And like, I mean, we know this as artists. Like, I feel like there's some prints that are just like my babies that I know sell really well, or like ones that I'm really, really proud of and I want to showcase like on a larger scale. But then there's other ones, like I finished a piece recently, which was just kind of an off the cuff one, and I'm happy with it, but I'm like, I don't know if this would be like a big larger print seller. I'd rather sell it smaller. So but my friends were like, I would just try 2 sizes of each. So I'm going to try having my 11 by 17s at 40 and then getting 8 by 12s at 25. So because again, I feel like it's a good enough profit margin where I'd still make decent money, and I want to see how people interact with that. Like, they're not $5 postcards, but because that also is the other thing too, is people being like, I don't have my room on my wall. So I feel like I just kind of want to experiment a little bit, with that
Yeah,
instead.
I got started with something similar. Whenever I first got started, I was selling 8x10s, and then my larger sizes were closer to like a 16 by 20, or no, was it? I want to say
11
like
by 17
11 by 17, maybe. I'd have to look at a picture. I might post it of my first show, but the first bit of advice I ever got was to not do the 8x10s, and that was from Alan Panicow. And it was because they were the price point. You expect that margin to be bigger between the 25 and the 40, but they're almost too competitive. So I'm not telling you not to do it, but I think there was a time when I was doing it still, because I only had an 8x10 printer and I was printing them all myself. So what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
And somebody came up and they changed the price point on everything. They just took my prices away and they said, okay, just tell them the prices. And I think we raised it by like $20 each. And the deal was, if I didn't make more, then they were going to pay me the difference. And surprisingly, I made more at that show. Just I would be really wary of price points that are that close together. I might even go like I don't know.
I think if I wanted to do smaller pieces just to like appeal to the people who don't have wall space, my strategy would probably be to offer them as a different type of material. Like, I might offer small metals or something to be like, hey, this is still like a relatively luxurious item, but it's a smaller one, so that I could actually keep the price points like contrary, like, like, I guess you could say like a different strategy to what Alan is talking
I didn't
about.
give a strategy. I think I just told an anecdote.
Well, no, it's a pricing strategy of like separating your pricing points so that they don't step on each other. And I'm saying I would alter the type of item, like the actual makeup of it, so that they feel more separate in that direction, and actually bring the prices closer to each other. So it's like you can have the larger size regular print at this price, or you could have the smaller fancy material at like a similar price.
Yeah.
And that way you're not stepping on your prices, but you're also offering something for people who are like, I would pay more, but I don't have the wall space. Oh, but you've got a small, really fancy looking thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get that.
I think part of it was mainly
just a thought.
Yeah, no, and like I that makes sense, because like for example, my friend Daria Oxenova, she, like, the way she does her print, she does hers kind of in a similar way. Like, she has 11 by 17s, like which her 11 by 17 prints are photo manipulated together, because like all of her works are square pretty much. So she's
right.
manipulated like just standard, like 11 by 17 prints. I think she sells those for 20 or 40 or something. Maybe it's 40, I don't know. But she has they're smaller actually. She has giclées of her her original works, like in the square format, and they're like matted and packaged better, and they go for 80 each, even though they're smaller than the 11 by 17. They are probably they're probably like maybe 10 by 10 or something like that. So, but again, giclée, people usually charge higher for giclées anyway. And like, and again, I'm still working it out, but I think part of it was like the fact of like, I finished a piece and, I'm trying, it's more of a mindset shift with whenever I work on artwork, because like I said, when I work on artwork for me, there's some pieces where I'm like, yeah, like I want to showcase this. And there's other ones where I'm like, like I know someone might want to buy it. Like, let's see. And like, I just don't feel as,
Right.
I don't want to say confident about it, but like, okay, I still want to offer it, but I want to offer it more
Yeah.
bite sized because I feel like it's not going to be a big
Yeah,
seller.
it's a
But I could,
niche offering.
yeah,
You're
like,
talking about custom sizing too. And my friend, when you're walking through a convention and you see somebody's booth where they're doing like, I don't know, let's like your friend doing all squares or, all different types of materials, you can almost instantly look at that and say, oh, they're making a lot of money. My friend, Jessica Levi does that where she like everything in her booth is gold and a different size than everything around her. And, you don't even have to talk to her to know she's doing great. So there's something to that uniqueness.
Yeah, I think it's just with me. It's like because the other thing is too is like I'm running out of space on my table with 11 by 17 prints too. So
That's
I'm
true.
like,
I'm having
which
that problem.
Yep.
yeah, and so I mean, there's
That's
some
fair.
pieces I know. Like eventually, there's pieces that like I would recycle out, but there's some that I know I will keep forever. Like I'm just gonna be blatantly honest. Most of my money comes from my Hades and Persephone pieces. Like that is probably where like 55 to 60% of my income comes from. So I know they're staple, but it's like, I have my other ones, which I still showcase and people still buy. But it's like, as I create artwork, and that's the other thing too, is like, I don't spit out artwork all the time. Like, like everybody goes at a different pace, but I maybe come out with like one new piece a month, but I'm finally getting to a point, like it was funny because like I was like, okay, 6 feet's not enough. Now it's getting to a point where I'm like, is 8 feet even enough? So it's either a matter of like the way I consolidate my presentation or my approach to like what sizings I share with everything. So like, for example, like even if I didn't have every 11, 17 on the table, then I could have at least like the smaller ones on display too. I mean, and I'm just kind of rambling, like just trying to throw out what I've thought about, but again, these are the kinds of things that come up the longer you're in this game. It's like, they're problems, but good problems to have. And so,
Right.
and again, I just kind of been going back to that mindset of, again, how people are spending money. I mean, at the end of the day, people are going to spend how they want to spend, but we are currently still in a market where people are still a little bit wary. I think it's getting better, but I like I said, I try to think about accessibility as much as possible, not to the point where I'm like, undercutting myself, but to the point where, I'm still making a profit and doing successful at shows, but I'm not limiting from people that want to enjoy my work, because that's the thing that makes me happy at the end of the day is like, if someone buys my, like, that makes me ecstatic when someone buys my stuff and then they send me like a picture of it on their wall at home. I'm like, holy crap, my stuff is on their wall in their house, It's like, that's the thing that I really try to aim for while also trying to sustain myself monetarily. And, I mean, I hope that most artists have that same mindset, but it's tricky figuring that out because you have to pay your bills and do what you need to do, but also,
it's also,
yeah, try to figure
a difficult moment because, we've just gone through a wave of inflation, which means that the default pricing is being altered by that as well. Like, I think my approach to dealing with inflation was just like, okay, my prints at 40, like, I mean, a lot of us are charging like that for like, an 11 by 17 or 12 by 18 kind of a print. But like, I felt at the time that I started charging that it was the top end of what I could potentially charge for it. It's like I'm kind of pushing the limit at that point, but now with inflation, it's like, okay, well, the rest of the country is sort of catching up to that. Like, you compare it to like what other comparable or what other kinds of like goods you would buy, like, how much would it cost to go eat out at a restaurant with your family, or like, how much would it cost for like some piece of decor that you would just buy from a Target or something.
Right.
And the prices on all of those things have gone up dramatically.
50 is such a psychological number still. 40 is just $2 adult.
Well, the benefit of 40, of course, is that it's two $20 bills, which makes it easier for people to just pull the cash out of their wallet. So that was another part of the mentality behind that price point. but I think it's going to be a while before I feel like raising prices to like 60, so it's three $20 bills.
what I
Yeah.
tell myself whenever I look at my Gen Con sales, which didn't hit 10K. I think, well, 6 years ago when I got started, it would have been 10K. So yeah, I did good.
Yeah. I think like for me, it's just like I also think about what product I'm selling, and like also again like the profit margin as well. Which I mean, everybody knows that prints are usually relatively cheap to create. As bad as that
Yeah.
sounds, but so like I don't know. I don't think I could go above 40 just for mine because again, it's that accessibility thing. But things like the blankets, like those are a little bit more expensive to produce. If that goes up in
For
cost,
sure.
then like I have to consider that because that's a smaller profit margin than normal. So I don't know. It's a weird dance that I feel like we're all in right now. But it's so funny. The funny thing at the end of the day is, I still see so many artists that are just scared to increase their prices, and like I'm like, just do it. Like
Yes.
if you're at the right skill level, do it because people are like, oh, it's gonna turn people away, and I'm like, maybe a couple, but at the end of the day, people are going to buy what they want to buy. If they have the money and if it brings them joy, like they're going to drop their money on it, And I mean, granted, I don't want someone to go into bankruptcy to buy my stuff, but that's the other thing too with conventions is people are very impulsive and they're there to find things that they resonate with and take home with them as like memorabilia or things like that, even if they drop a more luxury price on them. So
the hard truth about that too is, as an artist, how much is your work worth? Because whenever you price it low, you're telling people exactly how much it's worth.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be worth less than everybody else.
Well,
Right.
and
There is an
oh, go ahead.
there's an aspect of that we are selling a kind of a luxury, like it may be a minor luxury, but it's not a thing that people technically need, right? They're making a choice to just have something that they want. And to some degree, there's an aspect of they might even feel more special about purchasing something if it's not like dirt cheap. Right? Like they're like, this is kind of a special thing, and I got to meet the actual artist,
Right.
and it didn't cost like the same as buying a tube print from some rack at Walmart or Target or something. And that's appropriate. That feels good because that's appropriate to the type of product that it is.
Yeah, I reached out recently to one of my heroes, favorite artists, Nick Alm, and one of his prints at, I think it was 18 by 24 is about $900. So, which I'm not going to buy, but if he's pricing it that way, he's selling them. So,
well, I mean,
yeah, he's got a certain number of collectors who are buying them, right?
Yeah. It's so funny because like I felt like that. Like obviously I did not have the money to drop, but like when I like Annie Stegg is one of my favorites. So like it's just so funny. Like she's mine. Like it's like maybe one day I'd have 5 figures to drop on a painting, but it's just like that, especially if it's someone you follow. Like just from my experience, like it was funny because like there was a piece of Annie's that I wanted to buy online actually, but it was out of stock, and so like I finally got the courage to go up and meet her at this last Dragon Con, which she's like the sweetest freaking person on the planet.
The sweetest.
She's
oh,
great.
So sweet. I'm like, how are you even human? You're like this sweet little fairy person, like just lovely as all she can be. And so anyway, like but I was just talking with her, and Justin was running orders, and surely enough, he rolls out this giclée right in front, right next to us for a customer, and it's the print that I wanted to buy online. And I just looked at it and I was like, I didn't even ask about the price tag. I was just like, okay, I'll get one too. Just feels like I don't that's just like what happens, It's like, I mean, yeah, that was my. I don't drop money. It's so funny. I'm very picky about buying art myself nowadays, because like, because again, it's funny. It's the same problem as everybody else. I just don't have
wall space.
Yeah, but like Annie's was what. But honestly, after framing it, like I got it framed. I mean, her giclée was like close to $200. After framing it, I think I spent like probably close to $500 on that piece alone. But like it makes me so freaking happy because like there's again that emotional connection with it. And at the end of the day, I'm like, that's the thing that drives people to want to drop that kind of money on your work. It's like, and granted that like, I think that's the other thing is like, I think of myself back when I started going to conventions, right? Like, you know, again, I did all fan art and like, you know, I did genuinely like the fan art that I was doing, but there was an aspect of it of like, okay, it was popular too. So I knew it would sell. Like if I draw Batman, I know it will sell or my whatever. And now it's like when you do original work, you don't have that, you don't know for sure, but now when you see what works and if it does sell really well, like for example my Hades and Persephone stuff, I never imagined that would be the thing that would completely change the course of my convention career, and it just still makes it still makes me so freaking happy because it's mine. It's not like a fan art character that like someone else created. I'm like, this is something that I created, and people like they recognize me for it, and like I could care less about that part, but there's just like a part of like, holy crap, like I didn't know how much this thing that came from me, just for me, resonated with people, you know? So there's a higher value in that, I think, especially when you get out of that fan art threshold, you know? So
yeah, getting out of fan art opens so many doors. And when you call it a threshold, it really is. You know, you're only as popular as what you've created. Whereas art, I feel like when you're doing your own thing, it's got lifetime value. I mean, real lifetime value. There's prints that I'm selling right now that you know my kids will probably sell one day. That they're just going to keep making money. From a business perspective.
Evergreen pieces, and kind of going back to what you said about how it's like a subset of your total collection that you're bringing to conventions is what like really pays for everything. I think if you ask most of the artists at these shows, they'd be able to point at like 3 pieces or 2 pieces or how, you know, like a very small subset like is normally what it is that like sells by far the most.
Well,
so we're closing in on our. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just gonna say one last thing was when you have those pieces that do hit the mark, it's also so intimidating because you want to hit that mark again, but when that happens, you're just like, okay, maybe this will be it, and then you're like, nope, and you're like, okay, the hamster's back on the wheel. It's just like, but it's good and it's bad. It's like it gives you a goal, but also you're like trying to be like, what is my next piece then that can help define me? Because like I love that those pieces are staples of mine, but also I'm like, I want to have other aspects of my work that resonate with people down the road as well, you know? So to have the variety, I guess.
Scary.
When you figure it out, let me know. I'm doing the same thing right now.
I will. It may be a while
though. The same with the table space. I've got to figure that out. And it's actually there's 2 other things I wanted to get to. The first one, you bought a giclée from Annie. Is she still doing the rolled canvases, or is it paper?
I think that's what it is. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it's rolled canvas. Because I bought one unframed. So
right, I talked to them about that, and that's something I've been thinking of. Is they'll bring the rolled canvases. And you can order these stretchers they're like metal stretchers you can put together on the spot at shows. That's one thing I've been thinking of. I remember asking her one time when I saw that, I was like, are you people buy these? Like, who wants to buy an unrolled canvas? And she says like, yeah, we sell a ton of them. So it's really something I've been thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, well, it makes sense too, because like, I know, like, it was funny. The other thing that tempted me to buy it was my artist friend, Ivy, who I was staying with. Like, Annie had a framed one that she had on the gallery wall. I don't know if you saw it, but like, it was one of her fairies, and she bought it, like, you know, framed and everything. And so, I'm sure that was a pretty penny, but there's some people that, you know, they want to frame their own pieces. You know, so having that nice canvas, you know, it opens the opportunity to still have that nice canvas, like fine art look for it, but then people can customize it for their own home, you know, because not everybody's probably going to want like a classical frame or whatever, depending on what their home looks like, you know.
And being able to roll it, I could very easily ship just 1 or 2 canvases that are already framed. But as far as a roll goes, I could fit probably, you know, 20 in one tube.
Right.
So that's really something I was thinking of as far as traveling. The other thing was you're still a full-time teacher, and I really want to know when you get time to make art because you're prolific.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say a piece a month for
Yeah.
an artist who's doing their own work, like that is actually quite prolific, I feel like. Like you were poo-pooing it like, oh, other people do so much more. No, that's a lot.
No, yeah.
That's something to be proud of.
I guess I haven't even realized it except for the last like couple years, like because I tell people, yeah, I teach full time and I do conventions, and I was doing freelance too last year as well, which I didn't have as much. I definitely didn't have time to do original stuff last year, but it's just like people are like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I have to do a pagan ritual to like, give myself the energy to get through it. But I've definitely reflected more as I'm getting older on like, I don't want to say it's taking a toll on me. It's not yet, but there's a part of me that's like with teaching and doing everything else, especially as my business is growing, it raises questions of like, okay, what will change in the future? If I'm just being brutally honest, I do really enjoy teaching, but I would like to hopefully get to the point where like, at least like if I'm transitioning to like where I'm teaching part-time and then doing conventions more
Right.
so, because the other thing that sucks about being a full-time teacher is like I have PTO, like I can take that to go to Boston, for example, but like there's things like Gen Con, like I couldn't do Gen Con anyway. There's no way I could fly back in time for PD the next day. Like being on a full-time schedule definitely I feel like limits my potential for doing more conventions. But also, like I said too, I'm in a very weird place. I'm an artist and I want to be an artist, but I also love stability, which do not go hand in hand.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So, so I'm
I
like,
hear you.
yeah. So, and also too, it's like, there again, like I said, there's the aspect. I've been a teacher for a really long time. Like I'm in my 8th year, going into my 9th now, and I that feeds my soul a little bit. But there's been a lot of changes in the last couple of years. So even like I was telling my mom, like, and I'm not even to get into like education and stuff like that today. That's not a conversation for this call. But it's like I'm just seeing. I feel a shift. And also too, like I said, I don't want to burn myself out. Like I'm young right now. I can do all this stuff. I can go to conventions back to back or all these things, but like it's going to get to a point where I can't, so I have to start considering, where is there going to be the cutback? Because also too, at the end of the day, I'm like, I want to paint. I want to draw things. And there's times where I'm like, I can't because I'm at work and I'm like, I just want to be home on my couch and work on art, for conventions.
Prioritization.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword, it's like, and that's the other thing I just want to say to anybody is like, who wants to do art full time. It's like, everybody's at a different stage in their life with an art career. And like, there's some people, like, I think they imagine artists like just jumping out the boat and going and free floating it, like just doing their own thing and making art full time. And it's like, it's not that easy. Everybody's got a different trajectory on how they transition into that, whether they're working full time and doing art or doing art and part time, or I mean, there's artists I know, like there's one artist I know, Swana, she's a doctor full time and has a kid and does conventions, and she does more than I do. So like, you guys think I'm crazy. I'm like, there's people that do so much. So, it's not as simple as like,
whenever you mentioned maybe the other day on social media that you had a full-time job, my head exploded. I'm like, ow.
This is a full-time job.
This is what are you talking about? And like, we're doing this personal work thing, and you're doing a series and going to conventions and personal work. I think I don't know if Stephanie was toes. I think it does take more time than fan art. You really have to, because it feels personal. You have to really make it right to you. It takes a little bit of planning.
Yeah.
A little bit more emotional
it
way.
It benefits from taking more time.
Well, it benefits. Yeah. No, I've got to figure out where your energy resources are so I can tap into them.
I don't know where.
I'm slowing down.
There might be some kind of pact I made years ago with the devil that I don't remember. So like, I don't know if that's a wise thing again, like I think it's just I've always had a pretty high work drive and work ethic, because like I can't just sit. I can't just sit and watch a Netflix show. I'm either like, like working on art or doing something else. Like, and that's just my personality. Like me just sitting and doing nothing for a day is like impossible, but I wouldn't say that's probably the wisest thing. But I don't know.
I think I need to get some sort of studio that's not in my home, because now that I own
Yeah.
I have a yard and I've got home projects. I'm like you, I can't stay still. And a
Yeah.
lot of, whether I hit the gym or not, no matter how tired I am, it's so difficult for me to sit here in the studio whenever I could be going and doing something like, trim the bushes or mow the yard, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So,
That's
And
one thing
imagine if you had a kid, Alan.
or the kid.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the funny thing. So like I actually lived in a house. I owned a home the last couple of years, and long story short, I hated where I lived, so I sold it. And so I went back to living in an apartment, and I love where I live and I don't regret the decision at all. But the one thing I do regret is like I miss having an office. I wish I like my desk right now is in my kitchen. It's like, which like I mean again, I'm fine with it, but I'm like I think part of it's like I have to get a storage unit for my inventory. And like one of my friends, like she got like found on the marketplace, like one of those like steel, like file print drawers. I'm like, I wish I had the space for one of those, but I can't because I live in like a small, like it's those little things that like, I just wish I had an office. And like, it's because that disconnect too, the disconnect from where you live and where you work is huge, like I used to have my desk in my bedroom and I can't do it anymore. There's no way I could, so.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Mm-hmm. I think we all have.
Every artist is, we're all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to let you go. I got to go myself and eat some dinner. It's a little late here, but
it's been lovely chatting with you.
Yeah. And I hope to see you at Dragon Con this year.
I hope so. Yeah. I'm hoping.
Fingers crossed we all get in.
Yes.
If I get in, I'm going to ask to be by Bruce, and you should ask to be by us.
Yeah.
Well, she's already by me.
That's right.
She's across the aisle.
Yeah. We'll kick Steven out. No, I'm kidding. Like, hell no.
He'll sick all his dragons on you.
Yeah. I'm like, you're going to make money wherever you're at. You got dragons at Dragon Con. You'll be fine. But no,
I know. It's unfair.
Well, and I guess it's like, well, and I guess I should ask, like, well, I mean, like, how many years have you done Dragon Con, Alan? Was it just that one, or had you gone before?
That's a good question.
Twice,
I know,
right?
at least, is it, because I'm trying to think if I'd been a third time. I think it's only twice. So, yeah.
So did you go back, and like, Bruce, how many times did you go?
That's
three times for me.
Oh, okay. So, and you didn't, did you go?
Yeah, that's one reason I didn't return.
Did you apply back to back?
It was back to back for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 21, 22, 23 for me.
Okay. 21 was when I was
I think I've skipped a year every single time.
Okay. But you got back in when you applied.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did message them this year because I couldn't go. I ended up not being able to go last year anyway. And I did message them this year and say, listen, I'm sorry about last year. I have every intention of going if I get in. I've set time aside, so we'll see if that makes a difference.
Yeah,
I just didn't want them to have any bad feelings about it.
Yeah, that was what I was curious, because like I didn't know, like I said, with comic and pop, like with long-term people like kind of going up, it seems like there's a lot of people in the art show that have gone many years, like repeat, like because they asked that on the application. They say, are you a returning artist? And I feel like there's a part of them that want returning artists, but I'm like it's only been
they're interested in a community that has some continuity, I think.
Okay.
At that particular show.
Gotcha. Okay. Good.
And I think fans expect it too. That's the only show I've been to where people come up to me and say, "Hey, I've been here for 15 years," and you're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
But it's great because people become collectors, right? And you'll see them. I saw people that remembered me from like 3 years before the last time I was there, which was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel better.
Okay. Well,
thank y'all.
Yeah, we'll have to chat again. I'm sure I tried to have Bruce here to keep me on track, but I'm sure I forgot half the things I needed to ask about traveling to shows. But I can always shoot you an email.
Oh yeah, there's so much.
So where can people find you if you want to go ahead and if anyone doesn't know who you are?
If you just Google my name, Ashley Cassaday, Cassaday. I just spell it out because people forget. Just Google my name. You can find me online, like and website, Instagram. Twitter, or X, I guess it is now, Facebook, and I'm the first one that shows up on Google, which is great for SEO, but also terrifying for like when I work in a public school. The high schoolers try to look up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Well, we will see you later. Thanks for joining us if you joined in.
Yeah, thank you.